Next up, we're going to switch gears a bit and move to the K-12 space and focus on the B2B, B2C, and B2G markets. And really kind of think about, is there room for all business models in the EdTech space? So we're hoping to have a provocative conversation about K-12 EdTech business models. So I would like to welcome up, as we are getting the stage switched, I'd like to welcome up Sajith from Blume as he moderates this engaging panel, diving into the dynamics of various business models in EdTech.
Yeah. So we have a Guinness Book of World Record. I don't know if you're going to demonstrate it, Bhanu. Bhanu is a Guinness Book of World Records champion. We have, the others who are not exactly in that category, but we have Sumeet, who's done a unicorn. We have Pranav, who's been building in the education space for the last 12 years, I think, right? And Jairaj. A very interesting, eclectic mix of founders with different business models. Sumeet and Pranav, interestingly, they sat together. It's B2S or B2B for schools. Bhanu, through Bhanzu, does B2C, and Jairaj does B2G. So we're going to debate this out. We're going to determine which business model is the best, and so on and so forth. There'll be fights. There'll be a lot of angry discussions, I'm sure. So let me get started. From an investor perspective, investors are very quick to pattern match. I'm a VC, and if anything VCs are good at, that's pattern matching. You typically have certain notions about businesses. You'll say B2G, oh yeah, it's slow, collections don't come on time. Okay, at least it's bigger than B2B schools, where the TAM is a question mark. For B2C, you'll say TAM is a kind of a sorted thing, but CAC is very high, So you have all of these notions, and I think this panel is a good one to kind of debunk some of those myths and also kind of give us some perspectives. So what I'm going to do is, over the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to just ask specific questions linked to your business model so that the audience gets a sense of the challenges of the business model. And then I have a few more, then I'll kind of open it up a little bit more, and then we can have a debate around some of the topics. So I'll start out with, I think Sumeet, I'll start out with you. So B2B schools, you've been at it for a while. 3,000 schools served and all that. What's the one, and I'm going to ask you guys the same question, what's the one key skill or capability you feel you need to execute and succeed in your business? Okay? And very quickly, I'll ask a follow-up question if you complete that. So what's the one key skill or capability needed to succeed in B2B schools?
Actually, you're trying to reduce 12 years of work into one skill. It's very difficult. I think, of course, like any entrepreneur, stamina, because schools are so steeped in habit and they have a certain way of buying which is focused on their immediate margin, to shift their decision process to learning outcomes. I think because that's the sustainable advantage anybody's offering their services to schools brings. That I think is the big one, and those people who are able to focus on that, I always say Saraswati before Lakshmi. So if you are able to shift the school's focus to learning outcomes, then you can create strategic and long-term partnership with schools. And those who have been able to do it actually have been able to succeed in B2B.
Just double click into how do you do this in reality? And B, what in your organization how do you design your organization to deliver on this sustainably?
Yeah. See, I think first is just the product solution that you're selling. If you're selling a mere book or an ERP or whatever, you're basically a cost to the school. And therefore, his decision is lowest cost. But if you have designed a system which is around school transformation, then you are going and saying that ultimately in the long term, for your school to have 1,000 students, you will have to deliver great learning outcomes, because that's what parents are paying schools for.
So just a quick question. To deliver on learning outcomes, do you feel your salespeople are more expensive than an average person who's selling books? Like, is that a higher cost you have to bear?
Yeah. Again, it's not a single dimension of expensive. I think they are more of a consultant to a school than just a seller to a school. So they will need to understand the school's full P&L, a school's full operation, so that they are able to go and consult a school that in the long term, delivering learning outcomes is your way to success, and here is how you do it. So of course, the DNA of the organization has to be designed around Saraswati, and then Lakshmi follows.
No, love this. Love the Saraswati Lakshmi angle. Love this. Pranav, over to you. Okay, very similar. What's the one single capability to succeed? And feel free to take a different example. No Saraswati Lakshmi here, So yeah.
But I would agree with a lot with what Sumeet is saying, that delivering learning outcomes and proving it that your products have led to an increasing in learning helps a lot. So we've been doing this since 2001, and since what has worked for us over the last 23 years is a B2B, a field sales team that goes out and sells it. I end up spending about 70% of my first year's order on the cost of sales. But my LTV to CAC is 20 because I have a 95% renewal rate in terms of number of schools and 110% in terms of the dollar value. So what that can only work is if the school is seeing enough value in you to pay you year after year after year with a price increase, grade increase, and subject increase. So the one skill to succeed in the B2B market is that, are you able to ensure that your product is utilized by the school teachers? It's embedded into the school timetable where the principal and the owner is able to justify this investment to the parents to collect it in additional fees. And the parents see the value of this as well, to renew the contracts. Because unless you renew, you are essentially never going to be able to run a profitable business.
Got it. That's fantastic. I love how LTV of 20 is incredible. So 5% churn rate is very low. So makes sense for you to overinvest, get a great team, overspend, not the right word, overinvest into getting a good school. And I love the focus on engagement. Is there anything you do to ensure that the engagement rate is met? For example, do you track schools on the basis of engagement falling, then you worry? What do you do to keep sure that the engagement is, the razor sharp focus on engagement is there?
Yeah. So what we've had is independent evaluations done where we are seeing linear correlations of learning gains to usage. So on the x-axis, if you plot minutes per child per year, y-axis, learning gains compared to a control group, we're seeing that this curve doesn't even flatten after even more than 70 hours per child per year. So the single god that we pray to is usage. And good thing is usage is a leading indicator. So at the end of the year, I don't have to make excuses why something did happen. On a daily basis, this data is being generated. On a weekly basis, the academic support team talks to the school as to where there is friction in getting usage. And I don't have to go to a principal and say, "Aap use kam kar rahe ho." I can actually go and say, "Class 5B, Preeti madam hasn't logged in for the last 5 days. Can you investigate what the issue is? And by the way, can you congratulate Rajiv sir because his class is doing phenomenal." So given that usage is a parameter, it's a language that everybody understands. It's a language you can drive through your team and the school's team. And that has a linear correlation to learning impact. Ultimately, at the end of the year, there is the evidence at the level of every child, every concept, what got mastered.
Got it. Love it. Is there a god for usage like Lakshmi or Saraswati? I don't know. But clearly Saraswati usage. Bhanu. Yeah. B2C, very different from these two. Different beast altogether, right? Tricky one, all of that. Historically been the graveyard of EdTechs, right? Yes. But you run a tight ship. You said it's CM2 positive. Love that. So what's the special capability or skill that you at a B2C company needs to have? How do you drive it?
I'll give you a little background, right? We're a math education company. We do mathematics education only. We teach to a lakh of children today. The biggest reason why I think B2C being a graveyard of edtechs is because majority of the B2C companies have been built around marketplace models, which is I find the nearest teacher, I find a skillful teacher from a tier 1 city and give you access to someone who does not have the access to the skillful teacher in a tier 3 city. Now that sort of an arbitrage played very well in a time of lockdown or COVID or like the other places, but things when they started going back to normal, people prefer the tuition teacher next door because there is a lot of trust which comes with it. The single most biggest skill or strength which a B2C company has to build, and for me the only reason for a B2C company which having the right to exist, is to be a pedagogy first alternate learning ecosystem. If you're blaming the schools for not giving the outcomes which they are, either you integrate with them a system or you create an alternate learning pathway. For us, being able to command that trust of saying that this learning pathway works in a parent, that's a brand story, right? For me, the fastest human calculator in the world
Yeah.
is putting forth a curriculum which works.
We're going to give you a test at the end of this.
Yeah, probably later part of this. But I think, building that trust with an alternate learning pathway and showcasing those learning outcomes very, very loudly, I think those are important. I think very similar points with what they mentioned.
Give me an example of how you drive your organization to demonstrate those learning outcomes to parents.
Look at every stakeholder of a parent as a school itself, right? A parent wants to see learning happen in the child. They're probably the most unbiased ones. For them, Saraswati is the most important one in the case of example. So for us, we give roll-ups to parents on saying, here's a skill set which the student has learned. You can go test it out in the real world. Here's what your child has learned today, and here's what they would have learned in the regular pathway of learning. So I think these roll-ups to a parent, educating them that...
So do you send a message at the end of the day to the parent or something like that?
Every time where there is a logical milestone which the child hits,
you send
them a message. Not just that. In fact, we've seen one of our best renewal rates, or the CAC problems to be solved for, when we started sending messages and points to parents saying, your child now knows multiplication. Next time they're on the road, give them a multiplication.
Very nice.
Right? And when they see that reinforcement makes them stick with you for the next 6 years.
Got
so,
it.
yeah.
Oh, great example. Jairaj, over to you. B2G. Okay, so a very different world. And I would say like a tricky one as well. Take us through what's the single biggest capability or skill required to succeed here, and how is your organization designed to deliver on that?
Yeah, so we as SwiftChat and ConveGenius, we are a B2G2C or B2B2C, right? So the idea was to create roads, right? If I would put an analogy, that accessibility and unlocking that sector was the biggest need, right? We just can't ignore 180 million children going, which is the majority of the country's population, not having access to quality education. So that was the biggest problem statement we were after. And we really did not look at business models in the beginning. We were looking at building an approach, solving the problem, right? How do we create those highways? And on top of the highways, there will be toll gates that will get created, which will create a business model. But the highway is important, getting accessibility to the right content, accessibility to the right applications. That was the problem that we were solving for. So essentially distribution, right? How do we get distribution to the last mile going? Through public-private partnerships. That was the business problem that we were solving. And in order to do that, what we realized is that essentially people were selling breadcrumbs to the government, right? Just because of the mindset that, not really good products need to go there. But if the contrarian thinking was that if we get really good products out there and give them at scale, that will create a reversible chemical change.
What's the capability? Being able to build those products.
We were building it, and we were doing it in B2B and B2C, right? While we were small in the initial phases of our journey, we had about 80,000 students on B2C side as subscribers, and we had about 400 private schools on which we were doing it at that point of time. So, but when these products get gelled across and can become public-private partnerships where it can reach the whole state at one go, that creates an irreversible chemical change.
Got it. So being able to kind of lock in those kind of models is what kind of sets and gives you the best chance of success.
Yeah, building highways, I'll get to that, right? Once you have built the highway, then you can build a Starbucks on it, on the side of it, and then a chai. So you can have multiple products on the highway, which will make money.
Sorry.
But the highway is important, right?
Little fuzzy, the rest I got clearly. So this is a complication of B2G actually, right? Okay, the next question is a little bit more around, I would say like, and here's an opportunity for you to go back into the business. So each of you has been through long years, right? And maybe Bhanu's not so much, but at least the other three have, and in your case, over a decade. Take me through, like for example, a specific challenge that your business model had, and how you kind of overcame it. For example, it could be collection. That could be a particular problem, or it could be, for example, churn rate, So, and I would love to kind of get a sense of how you re-engineered your business model to overcome that challenge. Open to anyone starting if you have a ready example, but otherwise, Sumeet, go first.
I think over the last 10 years, we've been we've been addressing the same problem and we keep chipping at it every year. And there is a long journey ahead. But see, I think all of us have learned in consumer businesses also that habit change is the toughest thing that you can take on, right? Now, we have 70 years of accumulated habit that teachers will pick up a textbook and use the blackboard to teach. And schools will operate a certain way. And we know it's not working because the learning outcomes are there for us to see. So now what we had to do was ensure that training we knew was not working. We had to ensure that we build a system where the natural behaviors of the teachers are such that learning outcomes happen. And then make it so easy and convenient for a teacher that the habit change is actually easy.
So teacher habit change and getting the teacher to take more agency, I think is a challenge, which I've heard from many founders selling into schools.
See, all of us know in theory that the multimodal way of teaching is the best way a student learns. But still, millions of teachers in this country use the textbook and blackboard. So there is a clear difference between what we know is right for the child and what is currently happening. And we had to unlock how do we make it as easy or as simple for a teacher to teach the right way. And that was the system. Now, so that's the product. But the GTM of it is how do you convince this whole ecosystem of a school principal, owner, teacher and parent to shift from their 70 years of accumulated habit to this new habit. So it's almost like, you first show them a dream and then ensure that your solution delivers on that dream. And I think it's a 20, 30-year journey.
Okay.
We have spent 10 years and we have now proven a model at scale that if you are able to make system intervention in a school, learning outcomes happen, schools admission grows, stickiness is there.
A small example of an intervention.
Simple thing. Teachers teach from a textbook. You take the textbook and give them a tablet. And that tablet has the lesson plan, the audiovisual resources, the assessment, and everything that the teacher needs.
Got it.
So that's suddenly, you're basically saying that earlier I used to have a landline and now I have a mobile phone. You've seen how the consumer habit changes with that single transition. Same thing we are seeing. You take the textbook and give a tablet, the teacher behavior suddenly changes.
Got you. Thank you. Pranav, you want to go?
One challenge that almost all the school owners that I meet talk about the low capability capacity of the teachers in the system. And this is not for lack of low pay, it's just there isn't enough supply there. In our first decade, we were only making student assessments, which means that children would come, they would take a test of English, math, and science. We would tell the teacher what the class was struggling at, the parent what the child was struggling at, school, where they are vis-a-vis the country. So the resistance we faced from the schools was every year you come, you do an assessment, you tell us where we are, and you go away. Can you come up with a solution? So in our second decade is when we built an adaptive learning software because we realized that even the world's best teacher struggles with 40 students who are all unique, who all have different learning styles and different learning capabilities. So what the software does is it is like a digital assistant to the teacher, and it helps every child learn at their own pace, at their own time, any device, anytime, anywhere in the world. Given that we are doing less than 180 days of instruction a year, but the child is growing up every year.
Yeah.
So this software enables continuity of learning. So the challenge that schools faced was low capability of teachers. The challenge that we faced was what after assessments. The solution that we came up was this EdTech software to enable the data to be visible to the teachers on who's struggling with what, and being able to respond to parents when schools are closed during extended breaks. And we're finding that is gaining a lot of traction in a post-COVID world where the question is less about if EdTech, but more about what EdTech.
Yeah. Love the fact that both of you are kind of articulating pretty much the same points, said in a different way. But teacher capacity seems to be a real choke point in this business model. And if you're not going to solve for it, you won't have a huge, scalable, successful, sustainable business.
And the teacher capacity, whether you're working in a government school, in an affordable private school, or in a top hi-fi private school, is universally low.
Interesting.
And it's not available at any price point. Yeah. You can't throw money at this problem.
Yeah.
I would say capacity and capability.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. You want to add to that?
No, I think
covered. Yeah. Okay, Bhanu, yours. Yeah, a big challenge you had to overcome, and that meant changing some aspects of your business model or doing something extra.
So I think might feel like a little bit of a repetition here, but
no, you have to say something exciting for B2C. You can't copy them. And
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of exciting news anyway.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things which we have seen is to be able to drive pedagogy which you intend to deliver at scale. What do I mean by that is, at the end of the day, our business model B2C is still teacher-led.
Yeah.
While there is a lot of aid, there is a lot of software, there is a lot of intervention which helps the classes happen a certain way. Trying to standardize it at a universal level was something which came out as a challenge when we were around 400 teachers big. To maintain the same amount of quality in the classes at scale needed a lot of tech intervention.
Fascinating.
Now teacher training, who's the talent pool for teachers who teach in a B2C EdTech? These are not formal teachers who have done their B.Eds, M.Eds, right? These are individuals who have done their graduate programs in science or math-related fields, for us in this case. These people need to have fun while they teach, right? Because these are people who will stick with us for a long time if you make teaching easy for them, which meant for us that, a lot of tools for the teacher, a lot of vigilance, which meant that initially when we started out, there was almost a 1:40 ratio for a mentor to a teacher to be able to do quality assurance, etc.
I'm going to rush you along slightly, but I broadly got it. Non-formal teachers, at least in their case, it's formal teachers, and the challenge of same problem that they have.
And I think maybe just I'll end it with a sentence. The biggest solve which we've been able to do is to be able to look into classes, transcripts, training AI models, which actually tell you what's going well in a class, what's not going well in a class, and actually give suggestions to the teachers.
Got it. Thanks. So, Jairaj, you've had 9 minutes to think about your challenges. So what are they? And I'm presuming it's somewhat different, but go on, like all yours.
So I think as a ecosystem, right, our customer and our user are very different personas. In case of our customer, the customer is the government or a set of schools or a distributor partner who is essentially selling to a set of schools, right? So the problems coming from the customer side are very different from the actual user issues. So from a user standpoint, teachers and students, we had to push the envelope on learning outcomes and improve teacher efficiency, right? We had a set of problems coming from the user-centric point of view. So our key challenge as an organization was, how do we kind of create an organization which solves for both sides, customer-centric innovation and user-centric innovation together, right? So that both the customer pain points and the user pain points as a platform go hand in hand, and that makes it very sticky and there's retention coming. Because eventually, as a platform, it's the learning outcomes and the overall impact that will keep the user coming on the platform. Where the customer is paying us, right? So customer also needs their pain point to be addressed. So it was a larger internal challenge for us to organize the innovation in such a way that the overlap happens between customer centricity and user centricity.
Got it. No, thanks for this. And now I'm going to be getting into the last 12 minutes. So what I want to do is talk, maybe my perspective, and I'm certainly kind of seeing a lot more similarities in your perspective. From a point of, investor perspective, do you think an investor should keep something in mind when it comes to these models? And I'm open to any of you taking this up and making it a little more interactive, so don't have to wait for my question. But fundamentally, I'm saying, as an investor, should I have a predilection for a certain model? I shouldn't, ideally, but is there anything that you feel investors don't get about these models? Like, this is your moment to kind of give it back, because, this is your moment, and I'll just sit quietly and take it all, So what do investors don't get about your model? And maybe there's one more question after that. So feel free to go in anything. You want to go?
Actually, more than investors, I'll talk about you as an investor. You've been saying that, India is about 15 million consumers, and there is not much opportunity below it. I think you don't get it. That ultimately, if you think about it, there are 270 million students who go to school in India. And if you go and talk to any parent, the topmost thing amongst the top three would be education of their child.
Yeah.
And even if they are not earning enough, they are borrowing to pay for their child's education.
True.
So one thing which baffles me is when investors say that in education or in schools, the TAM is low or the SAM is low. And I'm like, you yourself a parent, you should get it. But maybe there is some bridge to cross. So I think if you ask me what is the one message to investors, I think it is just that it is very easy to look at an Excel sheet and keep putting filters on, what is the disposable income and all of that stuff. But if you go and sit in a parent's house or visit a school, you will realize that irrespective of the socio-economic classification, if a parent is able to have 2 meals and a roof above his head, the next dollar is going for the child's education. And even if they're not earning, they're borrowing to pay for it. So SAM and TAM in a country like India should not even be a question. The only question to ask is, with such a large opportunity, who are the people who are actually solving it in a deliberate, learning outcome focused and profitable manner? And there are some good people. I mean, 4 of them are on the stage. But yeah, that's what we should be looking at.
Point taken about TAM, I think the biggest mistake, one of my big anti-portfolios, of course, now it's a different story, was White Hat Junior. And I remember passionately telling Karan Bajaj that your TAM's too small. And he came back again. He said, I passed on it for the second time. So I'm aware of the TAM thing, so it's something I keep in mind. But what else? Bhanu, you want to go first?
I'll pick up. I think maybe you can go ahead. Go ahead, go for it. I'll go ahead.
I think what investors, let's say, in a medtech sector would look like is for rigorous randomized control trial on whether the drug or the intervention works. And so I think EdTech investors should also look for evidence that the product has actually improved learning outcomes is going to be a very important one, because that's the best surrogate measure for whether your customer will buy from you year on year, again and again. Similarly, I think when you sort of think about, let's say, any manufacturing industry, you would essentially look at the quality, some measure of that, some measure of continuous improvements. And so what is this product doing to get leading indicators on data to continuously improve the product and the software? I think what investors today are getting too caught up with the economics of it or the market size of it, not enough on the product efficacy as measured by improvement in learning and customer renewal rates.
An investor who understands education and the product, we've got very high standards, Pranav, So, yeah, just kidding.
Adding on to that, I think one thing which at least I've seen is a lot of, folk which talk about market share, profiling the person or people who purchase a courseware or, an education product. Indian parents only care about grades, right?
Care about?
Grades.
Grades.
Indian parents only care about grades. Grades is the only thing which you really see. And if your product is not giving a direct, uptake in grades or a proof of it, it probably does not have, the size it does. A counter argument to that is 26 lakh children in India go to abacus classes, right? Abacus does not teach you anything about, getting better at school. The promise, however, is that the child develops cognitively and has a better ability to, let's say, go through learning in the times ahead. 26 lakh children in India is not a small number, right? And these are people who are from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. So the profiling of a tier 1 parent or a tier 2 city parent wants only marks, hence tuitions are the only ones which sell, is the reason why we had the edtechs which we did, which didn't work out the way they did also.
Fair.
So I think a pedagogy-first edtech has the right to win in India because there is something Asian about wanting the child to be better in life and wanting to preempt that investment. And,
Got it.
And hence...
Got it. Fair enough. I think what you're bringing out is more of a parental issue, which, fair enough. Jairaj, you want to...
Just to add, I think the sentence of pedagogy underneath the technology is not being checked by investors today.
Correct.
Right. That, I think, is the crux of the point.
Yeah. I think, Jairaj, you're always the last, but next time we'll start with you. Yeah, go for it.
No, I think I've been very fortunate to have very good investors who have backed us. And what has really worked for us...
Come on, this is your chance.
Oh, yes, we have 2, 3 here. I can see them. Yeah. So...
Can you... is he an investor in you?
Yes.
Can you just step out while he talks about you? Yeah. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
I want to go back to the stereotyping that, B2G won't work, all of that. Because eventually, right, that's the opportunity. It's a contrarian thinking, right? When you start stereotyping, that's also an opportunity because you're creating a big space for someone to come and innovate and unlock that sector. And it's a problem that needs to be solved. And if I would not be doing it, someone else would be, right? And there's a whole lot of value that is being created there. And I think if we just put that stereotype aside, a lot of innovation can happen. And not all problems come from comparable business models in the US. Some can be invented right here, right? You need to go on the ground and see what's happening and solve for it. That's where new business models emerge. And I think if that is the approach, then there will be a lot of investors investing in real problem solving. Yeah.
Hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
But I would just add that I don't think the question really is B2B versus B2G versus B2C. I don't think there's any versus. I mean, the reality is that 270 million kids go to school. Half of them go to government, half of them go to private. Both government and private schools suck to an extent because the learning outcomes are so poor. And we can't wait for a lead or a EI or a Bhanzu or a ConveGenius to reach all students because by that time, 12, 15 generations would have passed. Sitting today, the issue is parents are looking for learning outcomes, schools are not delivering. So somebody would get an extra tuition, whether it is math or English. Government school children would need a ConveGenius, private schools would need a lead or stuff. So actually, if you look at it, today's opportunity, even for the next 10 years, there are enough big businesses to be built in B2B, B2G, B2C, because the gap and the hole is so big, it's massive. I mean, if you look at any estimate, out of the 270 million, I would assume 5 to 10 million kids are getting good education. So that's 260 million kids to serve. So an investor, if I were an investor, and thankfully I'm not, in my portfolio, I would have all three.
Fair. Well
And
put.
just by the way, we also have very good investors. Huh? Since you were running
Go on,
Brownie
Pranav.
Points.
Yeah. Quickly, and then,
I think a good measure of quality, and like this book, How Asia Works, talks about how Hyundai grew from
how
Korea.
Asia works.
Sort of
well.
talks about how Hyundai sort of grew in quality because export subsidies were the only subsidies they would get. So I think a good measure for EdTech could be how exportable is your product. So 20% of our revenues comes from outside of India, from the Middle East, from very discernible customers where we have to compete on a global basis with European and American products. So just our ability to enter that market, retain the customers, the quality bar is so high that you anyways have a trickle-down effect on the product, whether you sell in India or not. So can you be built in India for the world and be an export powerhouse?
Yeah. Sorry, okay, got it. I'm going to just summarize and then there's a rapid quick fire round that's going to happen. We have 3.5 minutes, okay? Very, very interesting. One clear learning for me is that under the hood, all businesses are pretty much driven around learning outcome. These are not accidentally chosen. They are very well-run businesses, exceptional set of founders. They've figured out that ultimately you've got to solve for learning outcomes one way or another. They use different languages, they have different rubrics, but ultimately it's about ensuring those learning outcomes happen and demonstrating them. Each of them has a different way of demonstrating them, which means you need to invest in higher human capital. The salespeople will be a little more highly paid because in his case, they need to kind of demonstrate like how it impacts the school's P&L. In his case, for example, he talks about how it should drive LTV and long-term, etc. So I really, really love that. And it's no different for Bhanu with Bhanzu or Jairaj with ConveGenius. So really, really loved the focus on learning outcomes and demonstrable learning outcomes. That to me is like the real big takeaway from this. Then some interesting nuances and like a kind of this point about, I think the Abacus one was quite interesting. Then there's a little bit of interesting one about the software that you guys had to create. Jairaj's point about how we need to bring private and public guys together. So really interesting stuff. So we've got 2 minutes and very quickly, don't take more than 30 seconds. Imagine you guys are talking to a younger version of yourselves, starting out in the same industry, right? And this time, let's start with you, Jairaj. What's the single one point of advice you will give that person? I mean, it can't be learning outcomes, something else. Like, and start. Quickly, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would not spend on marketing, cost of acquisition, customer acquisition in EdTech.
Got it. Bhanu.
I'd probably pick a different sector for...
Not EdTech.
I mean...
They're not going to get invited next year. Yeah, just kidding, just kidding.
No, but I think, I mean, just from us, I think focusing on export, I think, as he mentioned,
That's a great
to
point.
the world.
Actually, that's a great
yeah.
point.
So I think when we started out, right, we started out by, let's say, focusing on one country, building for another, building for another. If I were talking to my older self, I would have cohorted, 100 students from everywhere and actually figured, what it is to export.
Gone international
math business.
first. Yeah, Pranav?
And create value first before you capture your slice of it. So how can you make sure that your customers get more students and higher fees in the school so that you're able to justify your products and keep charging a premium for it?
Create value before capturing. Yeah. Sumeet.
Similar, I think I would say first nail it and then scale it, because we ran our own schools for like 5 years, got the outcomes, built a system, and then started scaling. So you can't sell a product which doesn't work and which you don't believe in. So first nail it and then scale.
Nail it, scale it, create value before capturing it. Maybe not pick EdTech, but if you do pick EdTech, then look at exports. Okay, and so great points. So Jairaj says no marketing. So great, I think we're done. Fantastic. Hope you all learned about the different business models and had a good time. Yeah, we're done.
Thank you so much for such an insightful panel. I think regardless of the business model, what we were able to see is that these visionary leaders are doing incredible work in the sector.